The email notification chimed on my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Sarah, we need to talk. Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. It was from Marcus Chen, CEO of Pinnacle Industries, the same company where I'd been laughed out of a job interview 3 years earlier because of my cerebral palsy. The same company whose executives had whispered behind my back, questioning whether someone with my limitations could handle the demands of the tech world. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Now they were begging for my help. My name is Sarah Martinez, and this is the story of how the people who mocked my disability ended up desperately needing the very company they said I'd never be able to run. The journey started in 2019 when I graduated from Stanford with a degree in computer science and artificial intelligence. Despite my cerebral palsy affecting my speech and causing tremors in my hands, I'd maintained a 3.9 GPA and published 2 research papers on machine learning algorithms. I thought my credentials would speak for themselves. I was wrong. The first interview was at Dataflow Systems in downtown Seattle. The moment I walked into the glass-walled conference room using my walking aids, I could see the shift in the interviewer's demeanor. Rebecca Walsh, their head of engineering, tried to hide her discomfort behind professional politeness, but her questions quickly veered from my technical skills to concerns about my ability to keep up with the fast-paced environment. "Sarah, we appreciate your academic achievements," she said, glancing at my resume without really reading it. "But this role requires long hours, high-pressure situations, and seamless collaboration with multiple teams. Are you certain you can handle that level of intensity?" I explained my adaptive technologies, my proven track record of meeting deadlines, and my experience leading study groups at Stanford. None of it mattered. 2 days later, I received the generic rejection email about pursuing other candidates who better fit our current needs. The pattern repeated itself across Silicon Valley. At Technova Solutions, the hiring manager, James Peterson, actually asked if my condition was contagious during what was supposed to be a technical interview. At Innovate Corp, they scheduled my interview in a building without proper accessibility, then acted surprised when I struggled to navigate their poorly designed workspace. But the most devastating rejection came from Pinnacle Industries. Pinnacle was Seattle's fastest-growing tech conglomerate, specializing in enterprise software solutions. They'd posted a position for a junior AI developer that seemed perfect for my skill set. The job description emphasized innovation, creative problem-solving, and the ability to think outside conventional frameworks, exactly what I'd been doing my entire life. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday morning in their downtown headquarters. I arrived early, prepared with a portfolio of my projects and a presentation on a revolutionary algorithm I'd developed for predictive data analysis. The algorithm could process vast amounts of unstructured data and identify patterns that traditional systems missed entirely. Marcus Chen, the CEO, sat at the head of the conference table flanked by his executive team, Linda Rodriguez, the CTO, Michael Thompson, head of product development, and Jennifer Davis, the director of human resources. The moment I entered the room, the energy shifted. "Ms. Martinez," Marcus said, not bothering to stand or offer a handshake. "Thank you for coming in today." I launched into my presentation, demonstrating how my algorithm had successfully predicted market trends with 94% accuracy during my university research. The technology had potential applications across multiple industries, from finance to healthcare to logistics. Linda Rodriguez interrupted me mid-sentence. "This is all very impressive, Sarah, but let's be realistic here. Our development teams work 18-hour days during crunch periods. They travel internationally for client meetings. They present to Fortune 500 executives who expect polished professional communication." The implication was clear, but Michael Thompson made it explicit. "What Linda's trying to say is that we need developers who can seamlessly integrate into high-stakes environments. Someone who can think on their feet, adapt quickly, and represent our company without any complications." Jennifer Davis nodded. "In agreement. We're looking for candidates who can hit the ground running without requiring special accommodations or additional support structures." I tried to explain that I'd never needed special accommodations beyond basic accessibility requirements, that my disability had actually enhanced my problem-solving abilities by forcing me to approach challenges from unique angles. But they'd already made their decision. Marcus leaned back in his chair with a condescending smile. "Sarah, you seem like a bright young woman, and we applaud your determination. But Pinnacle Industries operates at the cutting edge of technology. We can't afford to take risks on unproven concepts or unconventional team members. Perhaps you'd be better suited for a nonprofit organization or an academic environment where the pace is more manageable." The rejection stung, but what happened next was worse. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave, I overheard Linda Rodriguez whisper to Michael Thompson, "Thank God we don't have to deal with that awkwardness. Can you imagine her trying to present to clients? It would be a disaster." Michael chuckled quietly. "I give her credit for trying, but some people need to accept their limitations. This industry isn't a charity case." Their words followed me home that night. I sat in my small apartment in Capitol Hill, staring at my computer screen, wondering if they were right. Maybe I was delusional to think I could compete in the cutthroat world of tech. Maybe my disability was an insurmountable barrier, no matter how talented or determined I was. But then I looked at the algorithm glowing on my monitor, the same algorithm that Pinnacle's executives had dismissed without truly understanding its potential. The code represented months of research, countless late nights, and innovations that could revolutionize how companies process and analyze data. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to beg for jobs at companies that couldn't see past my disability, I would build my own company. I would prove that the very traits they saw as weaknesses were actually my greatest strengths. The next morning, I withdrew my life savings, $15,000 from years of part-time work and scholarships, and officially registered Neuralink Analytics LLC. The name reflected both my background in neural networks and my belief that different types of minds could create connections others missed. My first challenge was finding office space I could afford. Most startup incubators and co-working spaces in Seattle were prohibitively expensive, so I started working from my apartment while searching for alternatives. I spent weeks calling property managers, explaining my needs, and facing the same skepticism I'd encountered in job interviews. Finally, I found a small, ground-floor office space in the International District. The building was older and not particularly glamorous, but it was accessible and within my budget. The landlord, Mrs. Kim, was a Korean immigrant who'd started her own business decades earlier and understood the challenges of being underestimated. "You work hard, you pay rent on time, you can stay as long as you need," she told me in heavily accented English. "I don't care about fancy degrees or big company names. I care about character." Setting up Neuralink Analytics was like assembling a puzzle with pieces that didn't seem to fit together. I needed specialized equipment to accommodate my needs: voice recognition software, ergonomic keyboards, adjustable desk setups. Every purchase ate into my limited budget, but I knew these tools were investments in my future success. The technical development took months of 18-hour days. My algorithm needed to be refined, tested, and packaged into a user-friendly interface. I faced constant setbacks, bugs in the code, compatibility issues, hardware malfunctions that required expensive repairs. There were nights when I fell asleep at my desk, only to wake up with new solutions that had come to me in dreams. During this period, I lived on ramen noodles and generic coffee, stretching every dollar as far as possible. My parents, Elena and Roberto Martinez, called regularly from their home in Phoenix, worried about my isolation and financial instability. They'd supported my education and career goals, but they struggled to understand why I was choosing such a difficult path. "Mija, maybe it's time to consider other options," my mother would say during our weekly phone calls. "There are good government jobs with disability accommodations. Stable income, benefits, less stress." But I couldn't explain to her the fire that burned inside me every time I thought about Marcus Chen's condescending smile or Linda Rodriguez's dismissive whispers. This wasn't just about building a company, it was about proving that innovation comes from diverse perspectives, not from cookie-cutter executives who couldn't see beyond their own limitations. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday night. In November 2020. I'd been working on a particularly complex dataset for a potential client, a small logistics company that was struggling to optimize their delivery routes. Traditional algorithms kept suggesting routes that looked efficient on paper but failed to account for real-world variables like traffic patterns, weather conditions, and seasonal demand fluctuations. My algorithm approached the problem differently. Instead of trying to optimize for a single variable, it created a dynamic model that continuously learned and adapted based on multiple data streams. The results were extraordinary. The system reduced delivery times by 31% and fuel costs by 23% compared to their previous routing software. Word began to spread through Seattle's business community. The logistics company's CEO, David Park, was so impressed with the results that he recommended Neuralink Analytics to his business partners. Within 2 months, I had 3 more clients, each with complex data analysis challenges that traditional software couldn't solve. My algorithm's unique approach to pattern recognition was particularly effective in situations where human intuition and machine processing needed to work together. While other AI systems tried to replace human decision-making, mine augmented it. creating partnerships between human insight and computational power. The success stories started accumulating. A local restaurant chain used my system to predict customer demand and reduce food waste by 40%. A manufacturing company optimized their supply chain and saved $2.3 million in the first year. A healthcare network improved patient scheduling efficiency by 35%, reducing wait times and increasing satisfaction scores. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Each success validated my belief that diversity of thought, including perspectives shaped by disability, was essential for innovation. My cerebral palsy hadn't hindered my problem-solving abilities. It had enhanced them by forcing me to find creative solutions that others might overlook. By early 2021, Neuralink Analytics had grown from a one-person operation to a team of 5 employees. I hired carefully, looking for individuals who brought different perspectives and experiences to the table. My head of development, Alex Rivera, was a brilliant programmer who'd struggled with social anxiety. My data scientist, Dr. Patricia Williams, was a former academic who'd left university research to focus on practical applications of machine learning. The team dynamic was unlike anything I'd experienced in traditional corporate environments. Instead of competing against each other, we collaborated genuinely, building on each other's strengths and compensating for individual weaknesses. Our differences weren't obstacles to overcome. They were advantages that made our solutions more robust and innovative. The office in the International District had been transformed from a bare space into a vibrant workspace filled with adaptive technologies, collaborative areas, and the energy of a team passionate about their work. Mrs. Kim would often stop by with homemade kimchi and stories about her own entrepreneurial journey, reminding us that success comes in many forms. Revenue grew steadily throughout 2021, allowing me to reinvest in better equipment, expanded office space, and competitive salaries for my team. We moved to a larger suite in the same building, maintaining our connection to the International District community while accommodating our growth. The real validation came when we started receiving inquiries from major corporations. Companies that had initially dismissed my ideas were now reaching out through intermediaries, curious about the innovative startup that was solving problems their internal teams couldn't crack. One of the most satisfying moments came when Data Flow Systems, the same company where Rebecca Walsh had questioned my ability to handle high-pressure situations, contacted us about a consulting project. They were struggling with a data integration challenge that their own engineers couldn't solve, and they'd heard about Neuralink Analytics' success with similar problems. I assigned the project to Alex Rivera, who solved their integration issues. In 3 weeks, the solution saved Dataflow an estimated $800,000 in development costs and 6 months of delayed product launches. Rebecca Walsh personally called to thank us for our exceptional work, though she didn't seem to recognize my name when I answered the phone. These ironies became a regular part of our business. Companies that had rejected me were now paying premium rates for solutions that my algorithm made possible. The same executives who had questioned my qualifications were praising the innovative approaches that emerged from my different way of thinking. But the most significant challenge was still ahead. In December 2021, I received a call that would test everything I'd built. The voice on the other end was familiar, though I hadn't heard it in over 2 years. Ms. Martinez, this is Marcus Chen from Pinnacle Industries. I hope you remember our previous meeting. I'm calling because we find ourselves in a rather unique situation, and we believe Neuralink Analytics might be able to help us. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Marcus Chen, the same CEO who had suggested I find work at a nonprofit where the pace was more manageable, was now asking for my help. Marcus's voice carried a tension I'd never heard before. Gone was the casual arrogance from our first meeting, replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. We're facing a critical situation with our primary data infrastructure, he continued, speaking faster than usual. Our entire client management system has been compromised by what appears to be a sophisticated cyber attack. We've lost access to financial records, project timelines, and communication logs for over 300 enterprise clients. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, processing this information. Pinnacle Industries managed software solutions for some of the largest corporations on the West Coast. A data breach of this magnitude could destroy their reputation overnight. What makes you think Neuralink Analytics can help with cybersecurity issues? I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the satisfaction building in my chest. It's not exactly cybersecurity, Marcus admitted. Our IT team has contained the breach, but the attackers used some kind of advanced scrambling algorithm to corrupt our data before they were locked out. The information is still there, but it's been fragmented and encoded in ways that traditional recovery software can't decode. Now I understand. This wasn't about fixing their security, it was about rebuilding their data architecture from corrupted fragments. The kind of complex pattern recognition challenge that my algorithm had been designed to handle. We've consulted with 3 major data recovery firms, Marcus continued. IBM, Microsoft's enterprise division, and a specialized team from Boston. They all said the same thing: the corruption is too extensive and random to reconstruct reliably. We're looking at months of manual data entry to rebuild our client databases, assuming we can even recover the original information. And what makes you think my small startup can solve a problem that IBM couldn't handle? There was a long pause before Marcus answered. Because we heard about your work with Peterson Manufacturing. They had a similar data fragmentation issue after their server failure last month, and somehow you managed to reconstruct their entire inventory system from backup fragments that everyone else said were useless. Peterson Manufacturing had been one of our most challenging projects. Their server crash had created a nightmare scenario where critical inventory data existed only in corrupted backup files. My algorithm had approached the problem by treating the fragments like pieces of a 3-dimensional puzzle, using probabilistic modeling to identify relationships between seemingly unconnected data points. The Peterson project took 6 weeks and required complete access to their systems, I said. What kind of timeline are you working with? 2 weeks, Marcus replied immediately. Maybe 3 at the absolute maximum. We have a board meeting with our major investors on January 15th. If we can't demonstrate that our data infrastructure is stable and our client relationships are intact, we're looking at massive funding cuts and potential bankruptcy. The irony was almost overwhelming. Pinnacle Industries had dismissed me as someone who couldn't handle high-pressure situations, and now they were begging me to save their company under the most intense deadline imaginable. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I told him. We'll get back to you within 24 hours. After hanging up, I called an emergency meeting with my core team. Alex Rivera arrived first, followed by Patricia Williams and our newest hire, Jordan Kim, Mrs. Kim's nephew who joined us as a junior analyst after graduating from University of Washington. They want us to do what exactly? Alex asked after I explained the situation. Reconstruct their entire client database from corrupted fragments, I repeated. Under a 2-week deadline. With the survival of their company hanging in the balance. Patricia whistled softly. That's like trying to rebuild a library after someone shredded all the books and mixed up the pieces. Even with our algorithm, the computational requirements would be enormous. Jordan looked up from his laptop where he'd been researching Pinnacle Industries. Are these the same people who rejected you 3 years ago? The ones who said you couldn't handle their cutting-edge environment? The very same ones. So what do we do? Alex asked. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for since that humiliating interview. The chance to prove that their assumptions about my capabilities were not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. We'll take the job, I decided. But on our terms. The next morning, I called Marcus back with our conditions. First, we would charge our premium rate, $50,000 per week, with payment up front. Second, we required complete administrative access to their systems and the authority to implement temporary infrastructure changes without approval delays. Third, all communication would go through me personally, not through intermediaries or project managers. $50,000 per week? Marcus sputtered. That's more than we pay our senior architects. Those senior architects couldn't solve your problem, I reminded him. IBM couldn't solve your problem. Microsoft couldn't solve your problem. We can. But expertise at this level comes at a premium rate. There was another long pause. Fine. When can you start? Tomorrow morning. But I want the contract signed and the first payment transferred today. Within hours, I had a signed agreement and $100,000 in Neuralink Analytics business account. It was the largest single payment we'd ever received, and it came from the company that had once suggested I wasn't cut out for the tech industry. The next phase required careful planning. Pinnacle's data corruption wasn't random, it showed signs of systematic encoding that suggested the attackers had used sophisticated algorithms to maximize damage while maintaining some internal logic. This actually worked in our favor, because patterns could be detected and potentially reversed. Patricia took the lead on analyzing the corruption signatures while Alex worked on scaling our processing capabilities. We rented additional cloud computing resources and set up a dedicated workspace in our office that could run continuous analysis cycles without interrupting our other projects. The technical challenge was unlike anything we'd tackled before. Pinnacle's database contained over 2 million individual records spanning 7 years of business operations. Each record had been fragmented into an average of 47 pieces, then scattered across their storage systems according to an encryption pattern that seemed to change based on the type of data being corrupted. Traditional approaches would have tried to brute force decrypt the scrambling algorithm, but that could take months even with supercomputer resources. My algorithm took a different approach. Instead of trying to crack the encryption, it analyzed the fragments themselves to identify probabilistic relationships. The key insight came on day 3. While reviewing corruption patterns in their financial records, I noticed that certain types of data maintained subtle connections even after being scrambled. Invoice numbers correlated with client contact information, project timelines showed residual links to resource allocation records, and communication logs retained timestamps that could be cross-referenced with other data types. It's like a spider web, I explained to the team during our morning briefing. The attackers cut all the visible strands, but the anchor points are still there. If we can identify enough anchor points, we can reconstruct the entire web structure. This approach required running billions of probability calculations to test potential relationships between data fragments. Our algorithm would propose a connection, verify it against known patterns, then use successful matches to predict additional relationships in an expanding cascade of reconstruction. The process was computationally intensive and emotionally exhausting. We worked 12-hour shifts, monitoring progress indicators that crept forward by fractions of percentages each day. Every small breakthrough was followed by hours of verification to ensure we weren't building reconstructions on false assumptions. On day 7, we achieved our first major milestone, successfully reconstructing the complete client contact database with 94% accuracy. Marcus visited our office personally to review the results, accompanied by Linda Rodriguez and Michael Thompson. Walking into our international district office, the 3 Pinnacle executives looked distinctly uncomfortable. Our workspace was nothing like their sleek downtown headquarters. It was functional rather than impressive, filled with adaptive equipment and personal touches that reflected our team's diverse backgrounds. "This is cozy," Linda commented, glancing around at our collection of mismatched furniture and Mrs. Kim's Korean artwork on the walls. "It works for us," I replied, leading them to our main conference area where Patricia had prepared a demonstration of our progress. The presentation was flawless. Patricia walked them through our reconstruction methodology, showing how we'd managed to recover client information that their own IT team had written off as permanently lost. Alex demonstrated the verification processes we'd built to ensure data accuracy, and Jordan presented our timeline for completing the remaining database components. Marcus stared at the recovered client list on our main monitor. "This is impossible. Our own engineers said this data was corrupted beyond any hope of recovery." "Your engineers were thinking about the problem in traditional terms," I explained. "They were trying to reverse the encryption. We ignored the encryption and focused on the inherent relationships within the data itself." Michael Thompson, who had barely spoken during our original interview 3 years earlier, now seemed fascinated by our approach. "How did you know this would work? What if the corruption had been truly random?" "Then we would have failed," I admitted. "But most cyber attacks aren't designed to destroy data completely, they're designed to make it inaccessible. The attackers wanted to damage your company, not eliminate evidence of their own activity. That meant they had to maintain some internal logic in their scrambling algorithm." Linda Rodriguez was taking notes on her tablet. "What's your confidence level for recovering the remaining data?" 97% for financial records, 85% for project documentation, and about 70% for internal communications, Patricia answered. "The communication logs are the most heavily corrupted, but we're developing workarounds." As the Pinnacle executives prepared to leave, Marcus pulled me aside. "Sarah, I have to ask, do you remember our first meeting?" "I remember it very clearly." He looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I want you to know that we've learned a lot about assumptions and missed opportunities since then. What you've accomplished here is extraordinary." "Thank you," I said simply, not offering him the forgiveness he seemed to be seeking. After they left, Alex turned to me with a grin. "Did you see their faces when Patricia started explaining quantum probability modeling? They had no idea what she was talking about." "The best part was when Linda asked if we were sure our little algorithm could handle enterprise-level complexity," Jordan added, while we were literally showing her the results on screen. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The same executives who had questioned my ability to work in high-pressure situations were now watching us solve their company's most critical crisis under an impossible deadline, but we still had 8 days left, and the hardest work was yet to come. The breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. on day 10. I was alone in the office, running final verification checks on the financial database reconstruction when my algorithm detected something unexpected. Hidden within the corrupted communication logs were fragments of code that didn't belong to Pinnacle's standard software architecture. The attackers had left behind more than just scrambled data, they'd embedded a secondary payload designed to Activate 2 weeks after the initial breach. If my discovery was correct, Pinnacle wasn't just dealing with corrupted files. They were sitting on a time bomb that would trigger a complete system shutdown during their crucial investor meeting. I immediately called Alex, waking him up at his apartment in Ballard. "You need to get here now," I told him. "And bring your forensics toolkit." "What's wrong? Did something fail in the reconstruction?" "No, we found something much worse. The cyber attack wasn't finished." Alex arrived within 30 minutes, followed shortly by Patricia, who'd been monitoring our progress remotely from her home system. Together, we dove into the code fragments I discovered buried in the communication logs. The secondary attack was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of causing immediate damage, it had been designed to gradually corrupt backup systems and redundant storage over a 2-week period. When the timer reaches 0, every backup and recovery option would be simultaneously compromised, leaving Pinnacle with no way to restore operations even if they paid a ransom. "This is military-grade stuff," Alex said, analyzing the code structure. "Whoever designed this knew exactly how enterprise systems are configured. They targeted specific vulnerabilities in Pinnacle's backup protocols." Patricia was running probability models on the attack timeline. "If this payload activates as scheduled, it won't just destroy their current data recovery efforts. It'll make the original breach look like a minor inconvenience." The ethical implications were complex. Our contract was to recover corrupted data, not provide cybersecurity consulting. Technically, we could complete our assigned task and walk away, leaving Pinnacle to discover the secondary attack on their own. Given how they'd treated me during our first encounter, part of me was tempted to do exactly that, but destroying a company would also destroy hundreds of jobs held by people who had nothing to do with Marcus Chen's prejudices. Administrative assistants, junior developers, customer service representatives, innocent employees whose livelihoods depended on Pinnacle's survival. I made the decision that would define not just this project, but the future direction of Neuralink Analytics. "We're going to neutralize the secondary attack," I announced. "Without additional compensation." Alex looked up from his screen. "Are you sure? This could add another week to our timeline, and we're already pushing the limits of our resources." "I'm sure. But we're going to do this on our terms." At 8 a.m., I called Marcus Chen directly on his personal cell phone. "Sarah? Is everything okay? Did something go wrong with the data recovery?" "The data recovery is on schedule. But we discovered something else. Your company is about to face a second cyber attack that will be far worse than the first one." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus spoke in a voice that sounded hollow. "How much worse?" "Complete system annihilation. Every backup, every redundancy, every recovery option you have will be simultaneously destroyed in 4 days. The original attack was just the setup. Can you stop it?" "Yes. But first, I want you to gather your entire executive team in our office this afternoon. All of them. Including Jennifer Davis from HR. Why? Can't we handle this over the phone?" "No. If you want our help with this secondary threat, you'll meet with us face to face." "And Marcus? You're going to listen to what I have to say without interrupting." That afternoon, the same 4 executives who had dismissed me 3 years earlier sat in our modest conference room, looking distinctly uncomfortable on our second-hand furniture. The power dynamic had shifted completely. They needed us more than we needed them, and everyone in the room understood it. I began with a detailed explanation of the secondary attack, showing them exactly how the payload would execute and what it would destroy. Patricia presented our analysis of the attack vectors, while Alex demonstrated the forensic evidence we'd uncovered. "The sophistication of this attack suggests your company was specifically targeted," I explained. "This wasn't random. Someone with intimate knowledge of your systems designed this to cause maximum damage with minimal chance of recovery." Marcus looked pale. "Do you have any idea who might be responsible?" "That's not our area of expertise. But I can tell you that stopping this attack will require temporary admin access to your core infrastructure. Complete access, with no restrictions or oversight from your IT department." Linda Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "That's a significant security risk. How do we know you won't what?" I interrupted. "Plant our own malware? Steal your client data?" "Linda, we've had access to your most sensitive information for 10 days. If we wanted to damage your company, we could have done it already." Michael Thompson leaned forward. "What do you want in return for stopping this attack?" This was the moment I'd been building toward. "I want a public acknowledgement that Neuralink Analytics saved your company. I want a written testimonial that you'll provide to any potential clients who request references. And I want a formal apology for how you treated me during our first meeting." The room went silent. Jennifer Davis, who had been taking notes throughout the presentation, looked up with surprise. A formal apology. 3 years ago, you told me that I should look for work at nonprofits where the pace was more manageable. You questioned whether someone with my disability could represent your company to clients. You dismissed my algorithm without understanding its potential. Now that same algorithm is the only thing standing between your company and complete destruction. Marcus cleared his throat. Sarah, about that first meeting, I'm not finished, I continued. Your assumptions about my capabilities weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. You passed up the opportunity to hire someone who could have prevented this entire crisis. If you'd been willing to look past your prejudices 3 years ago, I would have been working on your cybersecurity infrastructure instead of building a competing company. The executives exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Finally, Marcus spoke. You're right. We made mistakes in our hiring practices, and we underestimated your capabilities. I'm willing to provide the testimonial and acknowledgement you requested. And the formal apology? Another long pause. Yes. A formal, written apology for our unprofessional conduct during your interview. Good. Now let's save your company. The next 72 hours were the most intense of my career. Neutralizing the secondary attack required not just technical expertise, but also creative problem-solving that pushed our algorithm to its absolute limits. The malicious code had been designed to resist standard removal techniques, adapting and evolving each time we attempted to isolate it. Our solution involved creating a digital honeypot, a fake system environment that would attract the malicious code while isolating it from Pinnacle's real infrastructure. Once the payload was contained, we could analyze its behavior and develop targeted countermeasures. The process required round-the-clock monitoring. My team worked in shifts, with someone always present to respond to system alerts or unexpected developments. Mrs. Kim brought us meals and coffee, treating our crisis like a family emergency that required community support. On the final day, with less than 6 hours before the payload's scheduled activation, we achieved complete containment. The malicious code had been isolated, analyzed, and permanently neutralized. Pinnacle systems were not only restored to full functionality, they were now more secure than they'd been before the original attack. Marcus arrived at our office at dawn, accompanied by his entire board of directors. They wanted to witness the final verification tests that would confirm their company's survival. As our monitors displayed green status indicators across all of Pinnacle's critical systems, the relief in the room was palpable. Board members who had been preparing for bankruptcy discussions were now seeing their company's complete recovery from what should have been a catastrophic disaster. How can we ever thank you for this? Marcus asked, shaking my hand with genuine gratitude. You can start by keeping your promises, I replied. The testimonial, the acknowledgement, and the apology. In writing. Today. Of course. Anything else? I smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. Just remember this experience the next time you're tempted to judge someone's capabilities based on their appearance or disability. Innovation comes from diverse perspectives, not from hiring people who all think the same way. As the Pinnacle executives filed out of our office, chattering excitedly about their miraculous recovery, Alex turned to me with a grin. So what's next for Neuralink Analytics? I looked around our small office in the International District, filled with adaptive equipment and the energy of a team that had just accomplished the impossible. Next, we're going to change how the entire tech industry thinks about talent and potential. The real transformation was just beginning. True to his word, Marcus delivered the written apology and testimonial within 24 hours. The apology was surprisingly detailed and genuine, acknowledging not just their unprofessional conduct during my interview, but also their failure to recognize innovative talent when it was presented to them. The testimonial was even more valuable, a glowing endorsement from a Fortune 500 CEO describing Neuralink Analytics as the most innovative data recovery firm on the West Coast. But the real transformation came in the weeks following Pinnacle's rescue. Word spread quickly through Seattle's business community about the small startup that had accomplished what IBM and Microsoft couldn't. The story became legendary, not just because of the technical achievement, but because of the dramatic irony involved. Industry publications picked up the narrative, and suddenly Neuralink Analytics was fielding inquiries from companies across the country. The first major contract came from Harrison Financial Group in San Francisco. Their CEO, Rebecca Stone, had heard about our work through her network and was facing a similar data crisis after a ransomware attack. The fee for this project was $75,000 per week, a rate that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. We specifically sought you out because of what happened with Pinnacle, Rebecca explained during our initial video conference. Any company that can solve problems that the major tech giants can't handle is exactly what we need. The Harrison project took 3 weeks and resulted in complete data recovery with 98% accuracy. More importantly, it established Neuralink Analytics as a specialist in complex data reconstruction challenges. Our algorithm's unique approach to pattern recognition was proving valuable across multiple industries and crisis scenarios. By spring 2022, we had outgrown our international district office. The team had expanded to 12 employees, including specialists in cybersecurity, machine learning, and client relations. Mrs. Kim was sad to see us leave but proud of what we'd accomplished in her building. Our new headquarters occupied an entire floor of a modern building in South Lake Union, complete with state-of-the-art adaptive technologies and collaborative workspaces designed to accommodate diverse needs and working styles. The contrast with our humble beginnings was striking, but we maintained the inclusive culture that had made our early success possible. The most satisfying moment came when Dataflow Systems, the company where Rebecca Walsh had questioned my ability to handle high-pressure situations, approached us about a consulting partnership. They wanted to license our algorithm for their own data recovery services. "We've been following your company's progress," Rebecca admitted during our negotiation meeting. "Your approach to data analysis is revolutionary, and we'd like to explore ways to incorporate it into our service offerings." The licensing deal was worth $2.3 million over 3 years, with additional royalties based on usage. More importantly, it represented a complete validation of the innovative approaches that traditional companies had initially dismissed, but the transformation extended beyond business success. The story of Neuralink Analytics had become a case study in how diversity drives innovation, and I found myself invited to speak at technology conferences across the country. The first major speaking engagement was at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. Standing on stage before an audience of venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders, I shared the story of how being underestimated had actually become my greatest competitive advantage. Disability isn't a limitation, it's a different way of processing information and solving problems, I explained to the packed auditorium. When you're forced to find alternative approaches your entire life, you develop pattern recognition skills that others might miss. My cerebral palsy didn't make me a worse programmer, it made me a more creative one. The response was overwhelming. After my presentation, I was approached by dozens of entrepreneurs with disabilities who shared their own stories of being overlooked or dismissed by traditional hiring processes. Many were brilliant innovators who had been told they weren't the right fit for competitive tech environments. This led to the creation of our mentorship program. Neuralink Analytics began partnering with disability advocacy organizations to provide training and support for aspiring technologists who faced similar barriers to employment. We offered internships, consulting opportunities, and direct hiring pipelines for talented individuals who might otherwise be overlooked. One of our first mentorship success stories was Maria Santos, a recent computer science graduate with autism who had been rejected by 15 companies despite exceptional technical skills. Her attention to detail and ability to identify subtle patterns made her perfect for our data analysis team. Within 6 months, she had developed improvements to our core algorithm that increased processing efficiency by 23%. Companies kept telling me I wasn't social enough or that I'd have trouble with team collaboration, Maria told me during her performance review. But here, my differences are seen as strengths rather than problems to manage. The mentorship program attracted attention from major corporations who were beginning to recognize the business value of neurodiversity. Companies that had previously focused solely on traditional hiring criteria were now reaching out to learn about our inclusive practices and their impact on innovation. Microsoft invited me to consult on their accessibility initiatives, specifically focusing on how adaptive technologies could enhance rather than just accommodate different working styles. Google asked me to speak at their Diversity and Inclusion Summit about the connection between varied perspectives and breakthrough solutions. The irony was perfect. The same companies that had initially rejected the idea of hiring someone with my disability were now paying premium consulting fees to learn how disability-driven innovation could benefit their organizations. In late 2022, Harvard Business School contacted me about developing a case study on Neuralink Analytics for their entrepreneurship curriculum. Professor Elizabeth Chen wanted to examine how our company had transformed perceived limitations into competitive advantages. "Your story challenges fundamental assumptions about talent identification and team building," she explained during our initial interview. "Traditional hiring practices focus on eliminating risk, but your success suggests that diversity of thought, including neurodiversity, is actually essential for solving complex problems." The Harvard case study was published in spring 2023 and quickly became one of their most requested materials. Business schools across the country began incorporating our story into courses on innovation, leadership, and inclusive business practices, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. In June 2023, I received an invitation to speak at the annual conference of the National Federation of the Blind. The organization had heard about our work and wanted me to address their technology summit about careers in artificial intelligence and data science. Standing before an audience of blind and visually impaired technologists, I realized how my journey connected to a much larger movement. Every person in that room had faced assumptions about their limitations, and many had found ways to transform those challenges into unique strengths. The same problem-solving skills that help you navigate a world designed for sighted people also make you exceptional at debugging code, identifying system inefficiencies, and developing user interfaces that actually work for everyone, I told the audience. Your perspective isn't just valuable, it's essential for creating technology that serves all users. The response was incredible. Several attendees approached me afterward with their own startup ideas, and we ended up hiring 2 brilliant developers from that conference who brought fresh insights to our accessibility testing protocols. By the end of 2023, Neuralink Analytics had become more than just a successful data recovery company. We were a proof of concept that challenged how the entire tech industry thought about talent, innovation, and competitive advantage. Our client list now included Fortune 100 companies, government agencies, and international corporations facing complex data challenges. The algorithm that Pinnacle's executives had dismissed as unproven was now licensed by 12 major technology firms and had generated over $8 million in revenue. The transformation was complete, but the mission was just beginning. As I looked ahead to 2024, I saw opportunities to scale our impact even further, not just through business growth, but through fundamentally changing how society understands the relationship between disability and innovation. The people who had once mocked my disability were now studying our success model, trying to understand how they could replicate our innovative culture within their own organizations. The student had become the teacher, and the lessons being learned would benefit countless others who had been underestimated simply because they thought differently. Standing in our South Lake Union headquarters, surrounded by a diverse team of brilliant minds who had all been told they weren't the right fit somewhere else, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't proving my critics wrong, it was creating a place where others like me could prove themselves right. The call came on a Tuesday morning in February 2024, exactly 5 years after my disastrous interview at Pinnacle Industries. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant, James Fletcher, knocked on my office door with an unusual expression. "Sarah, you have a call from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. They want to discuss a potential collaboration." Dr. Amanda Richardson, the Chief Technology Officer for the federal government, was calling about a national cybersecurity initiative. A coordinated attack on critical infrastructure had compromised multiple power grids across the Midwest, and traditional recovery methods were proving inadequate. "Ms. Martinez, we've been following your company's work for the past 2 years," Dr. Richardson explained. "The techniques you developed for pattern recognition in corrupted data systems could be crucial for restoring our national grid infrastructure. This is a matter of national security. The project would require clearance levels I'd never imagined needing, working with federal agencies I'd only seen in movies. The scope was staggering, potentially affecting millions of Americans who depended on stable power infrastructure for everything from hospitals to transportation systems." "What kind of timeline are we discussing?" I asked. 6 weeks maximum. If we can't restore full grid functionality by then, we're looking at rolling blackouts that could last months and cost the economy hundreds of billions of dollars." This was beyond anything Neuralink Analytics had tackled before. It would require expanding our team, developing new specialized algorithms, and working under security protocols that would make the Pinnacle crisis look simple by comparison, but it also represented the ultimate validation of everything we'd built. The same government that maintained accessibility standards designed to protect people with disabilities was now turning to a company founded by someone with a disability to protect national infrastructure. "We'll take the contract," I decided. "But I'll need complete autonomy over team selection and operational procedures." "Done. How quickly can you get a security clearance for your core team?" Within 72 hours, Alex Rivera, Patricia Williams, and I were sitting in a secure briefing room in Washington, D.C., learning about threats to American infrastructure that most citizens would never know existed. The attack on the power grid was just the beginning. Similar vulnerabilities existed in water treatment facilities, transportation networks, and communication systems. The corrupted data patterns were unlike anything we'd encountered in private sector work. Instead of simple scrambling algorithms, the attackers had used adaptive malware that continued evolving even after the initial breach was contained. Traditional cybersecurity firms had managed to stop the ongoing attack, but reversing the damage required techniques that didn't exist in any government manual. The challenge is that these systems were designed for reliability, not recoverability, explained Colonel Sarah Brooks, the military liaison assigned to our project. When they fail completely, with minimal backup options. Our approach had to be completely reimagined for infrastructure-scale operations. The algorithm that had reconstructed Pinnacle's database now needed to handle interconnected systems spanning multiple states, each with different protocols and security requirements. Patricia led the development of new predictive models while Alex worked on scaling our processing capabilities using government supercomputing resources. I focused on the strategic architecture, designing recovery sequences that could restore grid functionality without creating cascading failures in connected systems. The work consumed 18-hour days in a secure facility outside Arlington, surrounded by federal agents and monitored by security systems that recorded every keystroke. The pressure was unlike anything I'd experienced, not just the technical complexity, but the knowledge that millions of Americans were depending on our success. The breakthrough came during week 4, when I realized that infrastructure attacks followed different logical patterns than corporate data breaches. Instead of trying to cause maximum immediate damage, the attackers had prioritized long-term system degradation that would be difficult to detect and even harder to reverse. They're not trying to shut down the grid permanently, I explained to the federal task force during our daily briefing. They want to create chronic instability that forces expensive repairs and reduces public confidence in infrastructure reliability. This insight led to a complete shift in our recovery strategy. Instead of trying to restore each system to its original state, we developed adaptive configurations that could maintain functionality even with residual damage from the attack. The final testing phase took place in a simulated environment that replicated the entire Midwest power grid. Our recovery protocol successfully restored 97% of grid functionality within 48 hours, with the remaining 3% restored through manual interventions over the following week. When the real implementation began, I stood in the Federal Command Center watching power restoration indicators light up across Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois. Cities that had been running on emergency generators for weeks were returning to normal operations, hospitals could resume full services, and millions of Americans could go back to their daily routines without worrying about blackouts. Dr. Richardson personally thanked our team as the final systems came online. What you've accomplished here will be studied by cybersecurity experts for decades. You've fundamentally changed how we think about infrastructure resilience. The success of the federal project opened doors I'd never imagined possible. International governments began reaching out about their own cybersecurity challenges. The European Union invited us to consult on protecting their energy grid. Japan wanted our help securing infrastructure for the 2024 Olympics, but the most significant opportunity came from an unexpected source. In May 2024, I received a personal call from Dr. Emily Watson, the director of the National Science Foundation. She was calling about a research grant opportunity that could revolutionize how artificial intelligence systems were designed and implemented. Your work has demonstrated that diverse cognitive approaches can solve problems that traditional AI cannot, Dr. Watson explained. We want to fund research into what we're calling neurodiversity-driven artificial intelligence, AI systems designed by teams that include people with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other neurological differences. The proposed grant was worth $15 million over 5 years, with the goal of developing AI systems that could tackle currently unsolvable problems in climate modeling, disease research, and space exploration. The research would be conducted through a consortium of universities, with Neuralink Analytics serving as the primary industry partner. The hypothesis is that AI systems designed by neurologically diverse teams will be fundamentally more creative and adaptable than those developed through traditional approaches, Dr. Watson continued. Your company's track record suggests this hypothesis is correct. Accepting the NSF grant meant transforming Neuralink Analytics once again. We would need to establish research partnerships, hire academic specialists, and develop entirely new categories of artificial intelligence that had never been attempted before. The first major research project focused on climate modeling. Traditional AI systems struggled with the chaotic, interconnected variables that influence global weather patterns. Our neurodiversity-driven approach created AI that could identify subtle correlations between seemingly unrelated environmental factors. The results were extraordinary. Our climate AI successfully predicted weather pattern changes 6 months in advance with 89% accuracy, compared to 34% for traditional meteorological models. The implications for agriculture, disaster preparedness, and resource management were staggering. Dr. Jennifer Chung, a climatologist from MIT who joined our research team, was amazed by the AI's capabilities. It's making connections that human scientists missed for decades. The pattern recognition abilities seem almost intuitive, like the system can feel relationships in the data that purely logical approaches overlook. The success attracted attention from NASA, who wanted to apply our techniques to Mars exploration. Planning. The National Institutes of Health reached out about using neurodiversity-driven AI for drug discovery research. The Department of Defense expressed interest in applications for strategic planning and threat assessment. By the end of 2024, Neuralink Analytics had evolved from a small data recovery company into a research powerhouse that was reshaping multiple scientific fields. Our team had grown to over 60 employees, including some of the world's leading experts in AI, neuroscience, and adaptive technologies. The transformation was complete in ways I'd never imagined possible. The company that had started as a response to discrimination had become a catalyst for revolutionary advances in artificial intelligence and scientific research, standing in our expanded research facility in Redmond, watching teams of brilliant minds from diverse neurological backgrounds collaborate on solving humanity's greatest challenges. I realized that the mockery and rejection I'd faced 5 years earlier had ultimately led to something far more valuable than a traditional career path. We weren't just proving that people with disabilities could succeed in technology, we were demonstrating that neurodiversity was essential for pushing the boundaries of what technology could accomplish. The future of innovation wasn't about hiring people who all thought the same way. It was about creating teams where different types of minds could work together to achieve breakthroughs that none of them could accomplish alone. The people who had once questioned my capabilities were now studying our methodologies, trying to understand how they could incorporate neurodiversity principles into their own organizations. The revolution we'd started was spreading far beyond our company, changing how entire industries approach talent development and problem-solving strategies. The invitation arrived on a crisp morning in October 2025, almost 6 years after that humiliating rejection at Pinnacle Industries. The envelope bore the official seal of the United Nations, and inside was a request that would have seemed impossible to imagine during those dark days of job hunting in 2019. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres was personally inviting me to address the UN General Assembly about the role of neurodiversity in solving global challenges. The speech would be part of a special session on innovation for humanity, focusing on how diverse perspectives could address climate change, poverty, and technological inequality. Ms. Martinez, the letter read, your pioneering work in neurodiversity-driven artificial intelligence has demonstrated that inclusion is not just a moral imperative, but a practical necessity for human progress. We believe your insights could help reshape how the international community approaches complex global problems. As I sat in my executive office overlooking Lake Washington, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The scared young woman who had been dismissed as unemployable was now being asked to address world leaders about the future of human innovation. The preparation for the UN speech required months of research and collaboration with policy experts from around the globe. But it also prompted deeper reflection on what Neuralink Analytics had truly accomplished, and what lessons could be applied on a planetary scale. Our neurodiversity-driven AI had achieved breakthroughs that were reshaping multiple fields. The climate modeling system had evolved beyond weather prediction to provide comprehensive environmental impact assessments for policy decisions. Agricultural organizations were using our algorithms to optimize crop yields while minimizing resource consumption. Urban planners employed our systems to design cities that could adapt to changing demographic and environmental conditions. The medical applications were particularly revolutionary. Our AI had identified novel drug combinations for treating Alzheimer's disease by recognizing patterns that traditional research had overlooked. The system's unique approach to data analysis, influenced by the cognitive diversity of our development team, had led to treatment protocols that showed 67% greater effectiveness than conventional therapies. Dr. Michael Reeves, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins who had been testing our medical AI, called the results paradigm-shifting. In his published research, he wrote, the Martinez algorithm demonstrates that artificial intelligence systems designed by neurologically diverse teams possess pattern recognition capabilities that surpass anything achieved through traditional development approaches. This isn't just about inclusion, it's about unlocking cognitive capabilities we didn't know existed. But perhaps the most significant development came through our partnership with the Global Education Initiative. We had developed adaptive learning systems that could identify individual students' cognitive strengths and customize educational approaches accordingly. Instead of forcing all students to learn the same way, our AI recognized that different minds processed information through different pathways. The pilot program launched in 50 schools across 12 countries, including institutions in Kenya, Brazil, Finland, and South Korea. The results were extraordinary. Students with learning differences who had previously struggled in traditional classroom settings were suddenly excelling when presented with information in formats that matched their cognitive preferences. Maria Santos, my former mentee who had become our Director of Educational Technology, led the global implementation. We're not trying to fix students or make them fit existing systems, she explained to education ministers during a conference in Geneva. We're creating systems flexible enough to accommodate how different minds naturally learn. The educational AI identified that students with autism often excelled when complex concepts were presented through pattern-based visual systems. Students with ADHD performed better when learning modules included kinesthetic elements and frequent topic transitions. Students with dyslexia showed remarkable comprehension improvements when text was supplemented with audio narration and spatial organization tools. Traditional education experts initially resisted these approaches, arguing that accommodating diverse learning styles would compromise academic rigor. But the data was undeniable. Schools using our adaptive systems showed 34% improvement in overall student performance and 67% reduction in behavioral problems. The breakthrough moment came when the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, released results showing that countries implementing neurodiversity-driven education approaches had jumped significantly in global rankings. Finland, which had fully integrated our systems, moved from 7th to 2nd place in mathematical literacy. Kenya's participating schools showed the largest improvement in reading comprehension scores in PISA history. These successes attracted attention from unexpected quarters. The World Economic Forum invited me to join their Global Future Council on Education, Work, and Skills. The International Monetary Fund wanted to understand how neurodiversity principles could be applied to economic modeling and financial system resilience, but the most meaningful recognition came from the disability rights community itself. The International Disability Alliance awarded Neuralink Analytics their highest honor for transforming societal perceptions of disability from imitation to innovation catalyst. Dr. Rachel Thompson, a disability rights advocate who had been paralyzed in an accident and subsequently became a leading expert in assistive technology, spoke at the awards ceremony. Sarah Martinez didn't just succeed despite her disability, she succeeded because of the unique perspectives her disability provided. She has proven that diversity of cognitive function is essential for solving complex problems, and her work is changing how the world understands human potential. The speech preparation for the United Nations required distilling 6 years of experiences, discoveries, and transformations into a 20-minute presentation that could inspire global leaders to fundamentally rethink their approaches to talent, innovation, and problem-solving. I decided to structure the speech around 3 core principles that had emerged from our work: cognitive diversity as a resource, adaptive systems design, and inclusive innovation strategies. But I also wanted to tell the human story behind these concepts, the journey from rejection to revolutionary impact. The day of the speech, December 3, 2025, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I stood before 193 world leaders in the General Assembly Hall. The same hands that had trembled during my Pinnacle Industries interview 6 years earlier now held notes for a speech that would be broadcast to millions of people around the globe. Distinguished delegates, I began. 6 years ago, I was told that my disability made me unsuitable for the technology industry. Today, algorithms developed by my neurodiversity-driven team are helping solve some of humanity's greatest challenges. This transformation didn't happen despite my disability, it happened because of what my disability taught me about thinking differently. I shared the story of Pinnacle Industries, the humiliating rejection, and the decision to build something new rather than continue seeking acceptance from systems that couldn't recognize different forms of talent. But I emphasized that this wasn't just a personal success story, it was a demonstration of principles that could be applied globally. Traditional approaches to innovation focus on finding the best minds according to conventional metrics. I continued. But our research has proven that the most effective problem-solving teams are not composed of the highest-performing individuals by traditional standards. They are composed of individuals with complementary cognitive differences, who can approach challenges from multiple perspectives simultaneously. The audience was engaged, taking notes and leaning forward as I described specific examples of how neurodiversity-driven approaches had outperformed traditional methods in climate modeling, medical research, and educational design. The climate crisis cannot be solved by minds that all process information the same way, I explained. Educational inequality cannot be addressed by systems designed for cognitive uniformity. Economic instability cannot be prevented by models that assume rational, predictable behavior patterns. These challenges require the full spectrum of human cognitive diversity. I outlined a framework for implementing neurodiversity principles in government policy, international development programs, and scientific research initiatives. The framework emphasized adaptive infrastructure design, inclusive talent identification, and collaborative problem-solving methodologies that leverage different types of cognitive strengths. The choice before us is clear, I concluded. We can continue using 19th century assumptions about human capability to address 21st century challenges, or we can harness the full diversity of human cognition to create solutions we cannot yet imagine. The future of innovation depends not on finding people who think like us, but on creating space for people who think differently. The response was unprecedented. The General Assembly broke into sustained applause, and within hours, #NeurodiversityInnovation was trending globally on social media. Education ministers from 47 countries requested consultations about implementing adaptive learning systems. The European Union announced a €500 million initiative to develop neurodiversity-driven AI for environmental research, but the most satisfying moment came 3 days later, when I received an unexpected call from Marcus Chen. "Sarah, I watched your UN speech," he said, and I could hear genuine emotion in his voice. "I wanted you to know that Pinnacle Industries has completely overhauled our hiring practices based on the principles you outlined. We've established partnerships with disability advocacy organizations, implemented neurodiversity training for all managers, and created adaptive workplace environments." "That's good to hear, Marcus. But more than that," he continued, "I want you to know that your story has been a constant reminder to me about the cost of prejudice and the value of open-mindedness. What we missed when we rejected you wasn't just one talented individual, it was an entire way of thinking that could have made our company better." After hanging up, I reflected on how completely the narrative had transformed. The same company that had once suggested I seek work at nonprofits where the pace was more manageable was now studying our methodologies to improve their own innovation capabilities. Neuralink Analytics had grown into a global research institute with offices in 12 countries and partnerships with over 200 universities and research institutions. Our neurodiversity-driven AI systems were being used by governments, corporations, and nonprofits to address challenges ranging from pandemic response planning to sustainable development implementation. The company employed over 300 people, with more than 60% of our workforce consisting of individuals with various neurological differences. We had become proof that inclusive hiring practices weren't about charity or compliance with accessibility regulations. They were about competitive advantage and breakthrough innovation. Our research had spawned an entire field of study called cognitive diversity science, with academic programs at major universities and peer-reviewed journals dedicated to understanding how different types of minds could work together to solve complex problems. The personal transformation was equally profound. I had evolved from someone desperately seeking acceptance in traditional corporate environments to someone reshaping how those environments understood talent and potential. The rejection that had once felt like a career-ending disaster had become the catalyst for revolutionary changes in multiple fields. Standing in our headquarters on New Year's Eve 2025, surrounded by colleagues whose diverse minds had created technologies that were improving lives around the world, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't proving my critics wrong, it was creating a world where future generations with disabilities wouldn't face the same barriers and assumptions I had encountered. The mockery and dismissal I had faced 6 years earlier seemed like ancient history. The people who had questioned my capabilities were now implementing policies based on our research. The industry that had rejected me was now being transformed by principles we had pioneered, but perhaps most importantly, thousands of young people with disabilities were entering technology careers with confidence, knowing that their differences could be strengths rather than obstacles. The path I had been forced to create through rejection and determination had become a highway that others could follow toward their own innovations and breakthroughs. As midnight approached and we prepared to enter 2026, I looked forward to the challenges ahead. Climate change still threatens global stability. Educational inequality continued to limit human potential. Medical mysteries remain unsolved. But now we have proven that the diversity of human cognition, including the perspectives shaped by disability, could be humanity's greatest asset in addressing these challenges. The story that had begun with humiliation and rejection had become a testament to the power of persistence, the value of diverse perspectives, and the revolutionary potential that emerges when society stops trying to fix people who are different and starts learning from what makes them unique. The transformation was complete, but the mission was eternal. ensuring that every mind, regardless of how it processes information, has the opportunity to contribute to humanity's collective progress. The people who had once mocked my disability were now studying the innovations it had made possible, and the future belonged to everyone who had ever been told they didn't fit the mold. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.